My name is Lynn Cooley, and I'm very glad to have you here at our very first Company of Scholars lecture for the 2014-15 academic year. This is the 16th year of our Dean's Lecture series in the graduate school, and it is designed to bring students, faculty, staff, and community members together across the disciplines to hear from our own distinguished Yale alumni. We get few chances to do that. I'm thrilled to carry on this grad school tradition as the new dean of the graduate school. In addition, today we have something very special and a little unusual planned. Instead of a lecture by a single faculty member, we have a team here: Valerie Hansen, Mary Miller, and Anders Winroth, all historians on the world circa 1000. The lecture is based on their collaborative venture, which is a graduate course of the same name, taught this semester, that leads students on a remarkable tour of the world during the year 1000, when various regions of the globe took part in complex social, economic, and cultural networks across continents. Valerie Hansen is a professor of history. She started at Yale in 1993. Her work focuses on medieval China, Chinese religious and legal history, and the history of the Silk Road. Her 2012 book, The Silk Road, A New History, was described as the most readable and reliable historical account of the fabled trade route that cut across the center of Eurasia in medieval times. Mary Miller, the Sterling Professor of History of Art, specializes in the art of the ancient New World. Her work on ancient Mexico and the Maya garnered national recognition, including a Guggenheim Fellowship. She's elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1994, and this academic year she'll be delivering Slade lectures at Cambridge. Anders Winroth is the Forst Family Professor of History. His work explores the history of medieval Europe, particularly the religious, intellectual, and legal history, including the Viking Age. In 2003, Anders was named a MacArthur Fellow for his work on the development of medieval canon law as an important antecedent to contemporary legal reasoning. Thank you all for coming to give us a glimpse of your combined efforts in this class. Following the lecture, there will be plenty of time for questions. And then following questions, please join us in the common room, which is just adjacent, for a reception. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to our speakers.
Thank you all for coming. The plan for our 40-minute talk is a 39-minute plan. Each of us is going to speak for 10 minutes, and then this in the same order. So we're starting in Asia. So it starts with me, then we'll go to Europe, and Anders will take over, and then we'll go to the Americas, and Mary will take over. And then after we have each spoken for 10 minutes, we will return in that order and each speak for 3 minutes. I was going to say I'd like to start with, and just say it's been such a pleasure to teach with my colleagues. They have been extremely fun, and a lot of information has been on the table all the time. In teaching the course, I realized that, we focus on the year 1000 because so many of us think of the age of exploration as starting at a later date, but in fact, in the year 1000, there are a lot of new connections among different regions, and that's what we'll be talking about in this talk. And looking at the map, one of the first things we did was ask the students to draw a map of the world, and this is given projections, an accurate map of the world. But one of the things that really interests me is the formation of different regions and how we define these regions, and which regions are closer or farther apart from each other, not necessarily just in terms of distance, but also in terms of ocean currents. But I'm going to start today. I'm talking about, my remit is Asia, and in the year 1000, very simply, a line is formed here between China and then a northern dynasty called the Liao that governs a lot. This is the grasslands across Northeast Asia. And this is a more detailed map of the Liao. They are the Liao dynasty and the Kitan people, and this purple area is the heart of the empire where their imperial tombs are. This is one of the rare pictures we have of the Liao that doesn't barbarianize them, and maybe it's a later copy of a painting by a Kitan painter. And the Kitan and the Sung, the Liao and the Sung, had a series of battles throughout the 10th century, and then in 1004, the Kitan won a resounding victory over the Sung, and they drew up a treaty between the two powers, the Chinese and the Kitan, called the Treaty of Chanyuan, and according to which the Chinese agreed to pay 100,000 taels of silver. So that's a tael of silver. That's actually 50 taels of silver. It's 50 ounces of silver, and then 200,000 bolts of silk. The euphemism in the treaty was to help with military expenses, but this was because the Sung had lost. And that treaty really draws a line between the Chinese and the Kitan territory. There are agreements about there are markets set up on the border, and certain goods are not supposed to be traded. Some recent work shows that the border is permeable. It's not as fixed as we once thought. But in fact, the Kitan are oriented north and west, and the Sung reorient to Southeast Asia and import a lot of goods, actually a lot of strange fragrances like ambergris, things we know from the Bible, and myrrh and frankincense. So, and the diplomacy at this time, some of the people who are moving the farthest among different regions are envoys, and we have a written record on the Chinese side about the movement of envoys among different places. And the Kitans make an effort to establish a relationship with Islamic dynasty to the west in what's now Afghanistan. The Kitan have their own written language. We can barely read it. So almost everything we know from Chinese sources or from archaeological sources. And this is an imperial tomb of a princess who died in 1018. It's the only Kitan tomb that was not disturbed. And you can see some of the goods the luxury goods that were valued by the Kitan, which in the course we call bling. And I've got an arrow on the amber. The amber is very important. So some of the goods from this tomb, dated 1018 in Kitan territory, in that purple area I showed you at the beginning, we've got glass. All of these things are from the Islamic world. So a glass bottle, probably from Egypt or Syria, a rock crystal bowl that is very small, a metal plate with motifs on it that we can match other plates that have been found in Nishapur, Iran. And the Nishapur was under the rule of the Ghaznavids. That's this dynasty that was in Afghanistan and into some of Iran. And the Ghaznavids, the Liao decide that the Kitans who are up here decide to try to form a diplomatic relationship with the Ghaznavids. They send an envoy, and we know about this because an Islamic geographer named Marvazi tells us about this, and he tells us that the gifts that the envoy presented to the Ghaznavids, so silk, clothing, sable, furs. The Liao had a lot of access to furs of North Asia, musk, and then a bow with 10 arrows, which was a symbolic gift of establishing an allied relationship. And the Ghaznavid ruler replies and says this, that there's no faith uniting us. Basically, you are not Muslim and we are. And because you're so far away from us, we're safe. They're protected. Distance protects us from perfidy. I have no need of close relations with you until you accept Islam. And that is all. I was going to say, it's funny, on Mary's computer, this slide is blank. This is a map of the Islamic world, and so in my part of the talk, I want to establish 3 regions, or sketch 3 regions: the Liao territory, the Sung territory, and then the very large Islamic world in the center. And this is a map from, it's a copy of a map, an Islamic map from the 1150s, and it shows you the extent of the world known to Islamic geographers. And they knew more about the world than anybody else at this time in the year 1000. And that same Islamic geographer, Marvazi, who told us about the diplomatic attempt by the Liao to establish relations with the Ghaznavids, also reports that the main goods going from the Islamic world to the Chinese and presumably the Liao were ivory, frankincense, and genuine Slavonic amber. And then Hutu is a word that, this is my transition to Anders. The Slavonic amber has actually been tested chemically that this is not some of the amber from Liao tombs, and it turns out it is actually from the Baltic. And then the Hutu is walrus tusk, and that is one of the things linking East Asia and North Asia with the parts with Europe. And with that, Anders, you're on.
Thank you. So Liao princesses got amber from the Baltic Sea. The rulers of Northern Europe also got things from China and from the Far East. This silk cuff found in a Swedish Viking age grave does not come from silk made in China, but from silk made in the Middle East. But there are other less photogenic silk elsewhere in the graves that at least European textile historians think was woven in China, although Valerie tells me that Chinese textile historians do not agree. How did this get to all the way to Northern Europe? Let me tell you another story. This is about a not very ordinary school class that was camping out in 1975 on the island, the Swedish island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. I'm sorry, I wasn't there. I wasn't old enough by that time. They had been studying Viking history for several months, and as a grand finale, they were doing this real experience, living like Vikings, out in nature. They picked a good place, a place with mysterious ancient monuments, a place that, according to local lore, was where the Viking chieftain Stavar had once hid his huge, very valuable treasure. They had a very enjoyable time. The last morning, they performed sacrifices in front of an old Bauta stone. They sacrificed smoked perch, flowers that they had picked, pottery that they had made, and prayed that the gods in return would give them money. They needed money. They wanted to go to Denmark. Poor people. The bus that was going to pick them up was late. They packed everything up, they cleaned up, they were waiting, they had nothing to do. It was a beautiful Swedish high summer's day. They rested, they were relaxed. They saw a rabbit scurrying around on the meadow. And they thought, let's catch it. So they ran after it. But this was not a stupid rabbit. This was a Swedish rabbit. So it, of course, ran down into its burrow. One of the most intrepid boys in the class put his arm down the burrow. Would he be bitten by the rabbit? Or would he pull the rabbit out by its ears? Well, when he pulled the arm out, he pulled out something considerably more interesting. A coin, an old coin, with an inscription that nobody could read. They called the local museum, which immediately sent archaeologists that excavated the rabbit's burrow and found 1,452 silver coins that had been put there at the middle of the 10th century, a little before the year 1000. Most of them were Arab silver coin from the Caliphate at the other end of Europe. How did they get there? To begin to answer that question, I want to tell you a third story. Bulgar, at the very east of Europe, on the Volga, was a great market town in the early 10th century. It was the capital of the Bulgars, who had recently arrived. They were ruled by a ruler called Almish ibn Shilki Yiltavar. He had decided that they needed to become Muslim. So he had let the Caliph in Baghdad know about that. The Caliph sent a diplomatic mission to Bulgar to convert them. We know about this because one of the participants of the mission, a man called Ahmed Ibn Fadlan, wrote a report about it, which has been preserved in an Iranian library. Ibn Fadlan tells us that the trip there took almost a year from Baghdad to Bulgar. But he also tells us a lot about what he saw in Bulgar. He was an alert observer, very curious about the strange habits of these far, far away people. He tells us in particular about a group of merchants who arrived in boats on the Volga, Rus merchants. Historians fight about who the Rus were, but most agree nowadays that they at least were partially made up of Scandinavians. He tells us about the Rus, that when they arrive from their territory to Bulgar, they disembark, and the first thing they do is to go out to a great pole set in the ground that at the top of it has a face like the face of a man. In front of the pole, they prostrate themselves and pray to their gods. They say, Ibn Fadlan tells us, "My Lord, I have come from a faraway country, and I'm bringing here so and so much fur, priced at such and such a pelt, and so many slave girls, priced at such and such per head. And I implore you to bring me a wealthy merchant with a lot of dinars, Arab gold coins, and a lot of dirhams, Arab silver coins, who will pay me what I ask without haggling." The story tells us about one of the links in the great trade and exchange networks that brought dirhams and silk to Scandinavia, slaves and fur to the Middle East, and amber to China. The Arab Caliphate is one of the two great empires of the Mediterranean this time. Mediterranean culture and religion expanded greatly around the year 1000. Christianity making it to northern Europe, to Eastern Europe, Islam making it to Eastern Russia, to Central Asia, even to India, and also to Sub-Saharan Africa, all in the long year 1000. That is the period we teach in this class. The kingdom of Mali in the Sahel, south of the Sahara, was not only the place that supplied Europe and the Arab world with most of its gold, it was also an area that converted to Islam in the 11th century. The cultures of the Mediterranean pushed out in all directions, most distantly to Greenland, which was settled just before the year 1000 by a small group of Scandinavians. It's a beautiful, gorgeous place to live. Wouldn't you like to move there? I can sell you. No. These are the foundations of their houses. It's gorgeous, and there's plenty of green grass where you can feed livestock for the short summer. The winter is long and it's coming soon, and those icebergs might be pretty, but they're not going to feed you. So why did they move there? Well, the ocean had riches, fish of course, but also walruses. Their tusks can be polished and carved and look very much like elephant ivory and sold at great prices, certainly in Europe, and we now found out also in China, although probably not these walrus tusks from Greenland. Now, Greenland has another disadvantage for if you want to ship walrus tusks over to Europe. No trees grow there. It's too cold. You can't build boats. But the Greenlanders quickly learned that there was wood on the other side in North America. Labrador is heavily forested. Just before the year 1000, they started to go there. They even built a settlement at the northern spot of Newfoundland in Meadows, which has been excavated. This is a reconstruction of one of their turf houses built in just around the year 1000. Meadows proves that Scandinavians lived in North America during the Middle Ages. It also gives us fascinating hints about further excursions. There are butternuts in this settlement. Butternuts don't grow in Newfoundland, only south of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So we know that the Scandinavians there got them either by trading with American Indians or by going even further south to get them themselves. And I wonder, Mary, how far south do you think they got?
Well, we step on to the Americas. I see all these people standing at the back. There are a few scattered seats up here in front. If you're miserable, you can find chairs. I want to thank LINF and the graduate school for making it possible for us to continue on our voyage today in the long year 1000. And just to make perfectly clear, what is the long year 1000? We talk about the long 19th century. Well, we've expanded this a little bit longer, given how slowly time might have moved, to think of this from 800 to 1200. But we turn to, it may very well be, and Anders and I are now embarking on a little investigation of the evidence that may or may not, in the end, tell us that there were Norsemen who got all the way. Not only did they not like icebergs in the winter, Anders, but they wanted to go to Yucatan and see what is there with this rather strange ship that looms up in a fragment at Chichen Itza from just the long year 1000. This long year 1000 we look at rather differently in the Americas for the connections here, and if we go back and think about the currents and what the oceans do for us, they, in fact, the currents of along the South American coast are ice cold and make it impenetrable in many ways to cross the Pacific. And so there's little evidence, there's periodic evidence for some stray contacts, but not the kind of sustained trade, nor the writing in most places that allows us to see it. But it is these, we have addressed ourselves over the course of the semester and creating assignments for our students. I'm happy to see some of them are here today, the 21 graduate students from 9 departments and programs who are enrolled in this class. We have challenged our students to think about what is the nature of knowledge. How is it stored and communicated, whether we're in the Andes, or how is it that certain materials become the privileged ones? How is it that the textile primacy of the Andes emerges? And what do we do in a world without dairy, without certain kinds of domestic animals that we find, that we expect so much? Well, we depend heavily on archaeology. And from the Andes, it has been really a time of great riches in understanding the Huari, whom we can just wrap into our long year 1000, where there have been stunning discoveries. Finally, the kinds of discoveries that make it possible for us to imagine some of the loot that was by and large sacked from these cities. Or we can turn to the north coast and we can see these great adobe cities. Chanchan, probably one of the largest cities in the New World in the year 1000, and where some of the longest textiles of the world have been retrieved. We've assigned our students, in fact, 2 weeks ago we had quite a feast when we assigned to them the challenge of preparing not only the possibility of the feast of the year 1000 from 3 parts of the world, but also the daily peasant food, and as well as what is eaten in the time of famine. And it turns out that famine and feast are sometimes the same because of the amount of labor that it takes to get those termite eggs, for example. that might be both. We'll step north from the Andes and just continue our food tour to the maize-based diet that would transform the world. And as we had our students look at the questions of what these wonderful, what the wonderful meals were in the year 1000, how subsequently some of these fundamental plant stuffs would change the diet of the entire world, especially in the time of the discovery of the Americas. We looked at the way that tools and transportation and materials change the world or not. We had robust discussions in our class about the problem of the absence of the wheel in the Americas, except for its use as a toy, as you see here. And what that means when you're making anything from a pulley and making a building to when you are making ceramics. We talked about the challenges of games, what the games were like in the world before the discovery of the rubber of the Americas, and really focused in on the absence of team sports by and large until that moment. We turned in particular then in Mesoamerica to the great period of Toltec domination, which comes about at the north of Yucatan and north of Mexico City, in two great cities, Tula and Chichen, after the collapse around the year 800 of the great Maya cities of the south. And this is kind of a heartbreaking moment because this is when we lose all the data. This is when writing really stops being so widespread. And so we can find fine-grained historical data, day by day, blow-by-blow accounts before the year 800 and not easily afterwards. But we do now have the strong sense of one particular ruler at Chichen Itza, a ruler named Cacupacal, who for the later 9th and early 10th century was instrumental in the major constructions of Chichen Itza. And it's in this moment, 900 to 1100, when things begin to get really, really interesting. And we see Mesoamerica at its greatest wingspan as we turn and find that it is the turquoise that is coming from New Mexico and the gold that is coming from lower Central America, all finding its way to both Tula and to Chichen Itza. Tula here, a great northern city, and it is from here then that we realize and can understand the connections all the way to the American Southwest, where in the same mines that today yield principally turquoise, they were fertile places for gold and silver in the early years of Spanish domination of the American Southwest and also pre-Hispanic times. And around the year 1000, not much of it, gold and silver, are not of much interest. It is the powerful blue-green stone that we see here, and that in fact is what can be mined today. How else do we see these connections? For surely the turquoise in the all across Mesoamerica is emblematic of that contact to the American Southwest. Well, here's what's new in recent years: the discovery by taking the samples of the pots that were excavated in the 19th century and that are at the American Museum of Natural History today, that there's chocolate in these pots in the American Southwest. And it's tropical chocolate that was grown down in the Maya region and sent to the great city of Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon that perhaps many of you visited on your drives across the United States. Finally, it takes us in the year 1000. And is there anyone here from the state of Illinois? Have you been to Cahokia? Good. To the sense of the year 1000, Cahokia was a city of 50,000. It was the largest city north of Chichen Itza in this period. It is perhaps where we'll end right now as we come back in our year 1000, closing our loop as close to us as we can come in this class. Valerie.
I would like to just say that in the experience of teaching with Mary and Anders and thinking about what makes the world in the year 1000 different from the world later or earlier, that one of the differences that we noticed, I think Mary noticed, was that there were no new religions after the year 1000. And then people in the class would say, of course, what about Mormonism? What about Sikhism? The new religions, the religions that take shape after the year 1000 are remixes of religions that exist. And what's very striking about the year 1000 is that even though there's no new technology, so the different forms of transportation that people are using, they're walking, they're using wheeled carts, they're using wooden boats. In some places they have sails, in some places they don't. The news of the major religions spreads throughout the old world, not the new world. Almost everything we said all semester long, we'd say, oh, but not the Americas. In the year 1000, there are several famous conversions. Anders mentioned one of the Khazars who convert to Islam. The Bulgars convert to Judaism. The Kiev Rus convert to Eastern Orthodox religion, apparently struck by the beauty of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And that, I think, is one of the things that's new about the year 1000, is this knowledge of a much larger world. And if you count the Scandinavians, they even know about the Americas. So that is, I guess, the main thing I have learned so far.
It's been very refreshing to teach a course in conjunction with two such great teachers. And I have learned a lot from the course. We have discussed, one of the things we discussed early on is what assignments do you give at the end of the semester to our students? We discussed a lot at how when we teach graduate courses, have a tendency to give the standard assignment of a long research paper. 20, 30, even more pages. Something that I guess in some kind of ideal world is supposed to mimic the journal article. But who writes 3 or 4 journal articles in 1 month? We certainly are not capable of that. We thought of using this course as a way to think of new ways, not only new ways of teaching, but also new ways of assessing student outcomes. So we designed some, to some of us at least, unusual assignments at the end of the term and during the term. I'll just give you 2 examples. One of them is what we had yesterday, when each of our 21 students was presenting their curatorial talks on an exhibit or a small part of an exhibit on the year 1000 that they had organized in the museum of Circa 1000 that we hope to build as soon as we can get enough money. So the students use a program where you can lay out an exhibit, and then they have to decide, what is the theme of my corner of this museum? What do I need to say on the labels that are in the exhibit cases? How detailed shall they be? What is useful to convey what I want to convey with this exhibit? We had this all yesterday. We managed to get 21 students there giving talks all in less than 1 hour and 50 minutes, much thanks to me being a real martinet about timekeeping, for which I apologize. We also ask our students to design an undergraduate syllabus for a course on a theme coming out of this course that they would like to teach if they're becoming professors after college. We are particularly excited about that, since the 3 of us have decided to offer a similar course as an undergraduate course for the spring semester of next academic year. We are thus excited to read our students' syllabi. We are excited to see our students teaching these kinds of courses when they go out on the job market and when they go out and get jobs, something that we also think would serve them very well on the job market to be able to bring this syllabi. Mary.
I'm running the anchor leg here as part of this trio. When Lynn introduced me, she introduced me as a historian. It's very, I'm kind of thinking, it's exciting, I'm a historian. But I will say that I have felt like a historian this semester, but I have also felt very much that I've had the opportunity to make art historians of my colleagues in the history department. And I think this is the kind of outcome that when a few years ago I began thinking about and then subsequently applied to the Mellon Foundation for a grant on reimagining the humanities at Yale. And so we started our class in the museum, the Yale University Art Gallery. We went to the Metropolitan for a day, and we end with the virtual museum of our class and then a visit to the Beinecke when we come back after Thanksgiving. But we have depended so closely all semester on the intense reading of a few things. We know you can't possibly know the year 1000 when you walk out of this semester, but we hope that each week, as we have sent our students off to think about particular new challenges, that they do have that sense of the way that the thing can inform their thinking. This has, in fact, this semester, given me a lot of thought. Now newly back, I feel a little bit like Rip Van Winkle, or a brand new appointee to the faculty after years in SSS. But the way that, how do our students come to knowledge now? Do they start by reading a book? Do they start by Googling around? Do they look at the pictures? How do we, in fact, think about where humanistic knowledge lies in the era of what I would call a kind of visual democracy that never existed before? In the past, you used to have to wait for that special seeing eye guide dog known as an art historian to take you into the museum to help you find those pictures. And that's not the case anymore. So how can we make our teaching and inform our assignments more deeply with the visual? That is one of the things I've learned. I've also learned about the isolation of the world of the Americas before the year 1000. It has been painful to see how isolated before the Spanish invasion of the New World, how cut off it is, especially even in the United States. And so I have recommitted myself to this feeling that it is 1 year 1000, one very long year. And we look forward to promulgating this knowledge further in the future. Thank you.
Time for questions.
One of the things this semester is we constantly, Anders complains about, or said he was the martinet yesterday. We've all had turns as the martinet. And so we are keen on timekeeping, and that's why we have lots of time for questions.
Just a footnote, where in Illinois is that? Northern, southern, where in Illinois?
Cahokia?
Yeah.
It's not too far from, you go East St. Louis.
Mary.
Oh, sorry. Where is Cahokia? It's a great state park. Valerie, you worked at Cahokia. Perhaps you would like to describe your first paying job.
It's in East St. Louis, so not too far from Crawfordsville. Wait, I'm blanking on the name. The town where all the riots have been. Ferguson. Sorry, Ferguson. And it was my first paying job. I reenacted Mississippian Indian life and made the stupendous sum of $100 a week.
Not bad. And there are incredible daguerreotypes of the destruction of much larger mounds in East St. Louis in the 1860s. It was really a tragedy. the destruction of the vast range of the site. Yes, Doug.
How long is the long year, and does its length vary between regions?
How long is the long year, and does it vary between regions? Anders.
It's as long as we need it to be, as every long century, but we have, for the purpose of the course, we have defined it as 800 to 1200. But the closer you get, the better. It's, of course, a lot of us, when you work with written documents, then you can date things often more precisely than when you work with archaeological documents. And we all three have worked with both kinds of documentation.
Up? No, sorry.
In my history courses, the year 1000, or maybe the long year 1000, was about the low point of civilization in Western Europe, from the Roman to there's no hint of it. Not that it was blank, not that it was totally black, but that it was just worse than, say, Charlemagne's time or the beginnings of the Renaissance in 1200, something like that.
So the question is what was the year 1000 in terms of, say, the traditional notion in which this is often viewed as a kind of nadir of cultural excitement. I think we would all say that, well, I'll certainly say from the point of the New World, Cahokia will go on into the 13th century. Chaco Canyon is absolutely at its peak. This is the era of the Toltecs, and this incredible connections. These are really thrilling times in the New World, and so perhaps your history course was simply lacking.
I specified Western Europe.
Well, it is true. I often, in my undergraduate survey course on Western European history, I present the 10th century as the Iron Century, the century when you did not want to be alive. I think you didn't want really to be alive at any century before the 20th, because things were terrible. But it is true that it is a nadir both in Western Europe, in Byzantium, and in Islam. Things are going down, but that's where the year 1000 is about the time when you have the kernels of new growth in all these areas in Europe. That's when it all starts. When Europe takes off again, for instance.
Oh, I was only going to say that many years ago, Anders and I taught a course in the history department about the medieval transformation of China and Europe. And pretty much the whole semester I would say to Anders, and when did X happen? And he would say, starting in the year 1000. And so the year 1000 is more of a date in European history than it is in the other regions.
Yes, in the back. No, that's you, midway, yes?
What do you think is the benefit, more generally, of looking at history in this sort of one fixed time period across the globe?
So the question is, what do we think is the benefit of looking at history through this band of time around the globe?
I mean, a lot of world history is impossible to teach because you're trying to do so much. And a lot of historians focus on one part of the world, usually based on whatever languages they can read. So I think by focusing on a single time as opposed to a single space, you can get around the globe with some complexity. So I think it's a good alternative to the stock narratives of X nation's history. And I also think it's, in order to understand any given nation's history, you need to know what was going on around the world at that time, and I think that was a key motivation for all of us.
Go ahead. Did you have something to add?
No, that was good.
I guess one of the things that we've also found that's really been beneficial is that it's very clear to each of us that our own knowledge of the year 1000 only goes so far, and we hit this precipice, and we go right over it and explore new areas. Because no matter how much we know, we don't know everything about the year 1000. We couldn't possibly. And I think it's been useful. Our students might beg to differ, but I think it's been useful to model for our students that, in fact, you don't know everything when you're teaching. You have to go find the answers. You sometimes have to just say, I don't know that, and come back and find things out and figure out how you're going to come up with that piece of knowledge. It's been one of the features of our assignments is there is not only what is the answer, but how would you get to that answer? Right here in front.
In studying the spread of cultures as you did, is there a place yet in your studies for genetics, the study of varying genetic patterns in different populations?
The question is whether there is a place for genetics in our studies.
I mean, there is. We have talked about it. We haven't talked about it very much in this course, but it is something that not being a geneticist myself and not understanding the studies, I have read several studies of the genetics of European populations, and I hope I've been able to draw responsible conclusions from what I've been reading. We have shared some of that in this course, but nobody really took that theme and ran with it so far.
Far back on the left, my left.
Me?
Yeah, that's you.
I wonder if you could give us some idea of if or how you touched on questions of social and political organisation, either connectively or comparatively.
So the question is, how did we deal with questions of social and political organization? I'll just say that one of the first things we read was the 19th century foundational document on that was written to imagine what social and political organization would be among Native Americans and other non-Western peoples by Lewis Henry Morgan, in which he lays out the framework that all peoples should be able to be sorted into savage, barbaric, and civilized.
Well, Mark, I feel like we should answer your question. I think, to tell you the truth, that most of the time we got by with a shorthand of are these upper strata, medium strata, lower strata, because we were really looking at the connections among different places and much less at the changes, the internal changes occurring in those places.
We did also, when we planned the course, we decided to organize the syllabus around a different theme each week. So we have had the theme of bling, we have the theme of food, we had the theme of transport, we had the theme of calendars, challenges that meets every civilization on Earth, whether they know of each other or not. Everybody has to eat, and so forth. And one of the themes that we discussed as a possible one was rulership and kingship and such. But by the end, there's only 13 weeks to the semester, so we couldn't do it. We do have the last class is the discussion, what is missing from the syllabus? And I just gave those students who are here one of the answers I think should be there.
Paula?
Yes. Well, first thing I want to say, I have loved to take this course. So can you give us a sense of what happened in class? What any discussion is like, and also related to this, how the assignments corresponded to the intellectual goals you set for the semester?
The question is, what happened in class? And how did the assignments map onto the intellectual goals?
A lot of things happen in class. You should ask our students.
There are a lot of them here today.
Yes. We try to vary what we were doing in class. As I said yesterday, we had 21 presentations at a maximum of 4 minutes, not 4 minutes and 2 seconds, 4 minutes. Earlier times, we have had, each of us have given a lecture on the year 1000 in the region that we know best, which apparently in my case includes Africa. So I had to go out and read some basic textbooks. Other classes, we have had group presentations. The students have been pursuing themes outside of class as groups. Most of the work in the class is, of course, done outside the actual class time. So that it is start, I hope you answer your question.
I would say that one of our goals was for students to gain depth in familiar cultural areas and to gain breadth in unfamiliar ones. So we have constantly had what we would call the remix of the students. And we've even been insistent. We used place cards so that they could not sit in the same comfortable seats. So to try to keep unsettling the comfort zone given how uncomfortable we were. Ray Fair.
Did you consider the role of slavery in this time and how that may have differed in the similarities across the world?
The question is, did we consider the role of slavery?
It's an important facet of history that we certainly discussed. We didn't devote any particular theme to it. The themes that we did for the different classes tend to avoid the more slavery is not slavery as such a word is an abstract word. We try to avoid that. We did touch upon it several times, as I even did in the lecture now.
No.
How are we doing on time, Lynn? Are we doing okay? Okay. James.
Did you conceive of the class as principally a pedagogical tool for graduate students, or did you conceive of it as a history/art history course? And if you did conceive of it as a sort of pedagogical course of sorts, pedagogical training, then how will it differ from the undergraduate course that you guys are thinking about now?
The question is, if I can try to rephrase it, James, from one of our students in the class, did the course develop as out of interest of ours in the history or out of the pedagogy that we might develop? And regardless of how we answer that, how will it differ from the undergraduate class? Valerie, I feel that you suggested this class to me. So perhaps we were in a meeting, and?
Well, I think of the three of us, I'm the one who's crazy enough to think you can learn enough about the world in the year 1000 to write a book about it. And so we started off, I think, with the subject matter, and then I think the big change between a graduate and an undergraduate class will be so many of the assignments were asking you how to do things and setting, I mean, our goal was to give you a bigger toolkit than you might have, the students in different departments might have coming in to graduate school. I think with the undergraduates, the goal isn't going to be so much developing a graduate student toolkit. I think the assignments may be more tailored. I don't know. We haven't gotten to the undergraduate course yet.
And I would say one thing is that every student, including the 2 undergraduates who are among the 21, brought real expertise in some part of the world in the year 1000 to the table. And we won't expect that with undergraduates, and that's why we're really going to have to rethink what we do.
I agree.
Jenny?
I would love to hear how the students reacted to your innovative assessments and a little bit about whether you might recommend that your colleagues try such creative alternatives.
So Jenny Fredericks would like to know how our students feel about all this. Well, they're not done yet. And then what was the second part of the question? Would you recommend those creative assessments would we recommend these creative assignments to our colleagues?
I think yes. I mean, this ties into James' question too. Do we do this for pedagogy or for subject matter? We do it for both, of course. And I certainly feel that I learned a lot about subject matter, and I learned probably even more about pedagogy. I think we do well as professors to vary assignments, just as assessment assignments, just as we do well in varying the methods of instructions that we use. And for us, it has been a laboratory to learn about this because we have different teaching styles, the three of us, and we learn from each other. And we hope our students are learning from it as well. And maybe none of this none of the assessments and so forth are brilliant inventions that we came up with in the last few months. These are methods that are used across campus by others of our colleagues, and we have looked at what other people have used and try to use it as well.
Here in front.
So relatedly, what will your final assessment, the larger projects, entail? Are you having the students choose the format.
The question is, what is our final assessment?
There were two final assignments. One was using SketchUp to make a museum case of 6 to 10 objects or pictures from more than one region in the world in the year 1000. And then the other assignment, and that assignment had many components, making the case. I think I was profoundly relieved I did not have to make a case using SketchUp. Everyone said the software took a long time to learn. Writing an essay about their case, writing labels for the case, writing text for the wall, introducing the case, and then the undergraduate syllabus. Those are the two main.
There's a third also, and that is we ask the students to review the museum as a whole, to write a review of not only their own exhibit case, but all of the exhibit cases as conceived of as a museum altogether. Sorry.
One more question. Okay, one more question. You've had your hand up a long time.
Thank you. In the far southern latitudes, there wasn't much representation in the Americas or Africa or Australia. Was that a product primarily of area expertise, or the connections are severed or fade out?
The question is, what happened in the far southern latitudes, especially given all of that emphasis on Greenland? So in the year 1000, there are some connections that you can see of the Huari down beyond Peru and into northern Chile. But it would be very modest in terms of what we would find that connects to one of the grand cultures that would be focused in the central Andes. So we couldn't do everything. That would be my explanation for the Americas. It's not as though there are not people living there. But where we have the kind of durability and works that were imbued with meaning by their makers, that gives us some possibility of making an intelligent discussion and comparison of those works. We did decide early on that we would skip Australia altogether. We were already feeling as though we were at the absolute limits of our, we were constantly going over the precipices of our knowledge as it was.
But I was going to say one of the first assignments asked the students to collect materials in their own field of study, and then also to choose a field that was new to them and develop a bibliography about that part of the world in the year 1000. And one of the students, who is from Slavic, from Russian and East European MA student, he did Australia for his sample. And I remember saying to him, well, what happened in the year 1000? And he said, of course, that humans get to Australia in 40,000 BC, so that's the start date. But he said there are people here who will correct me, I hope. Is there something like the super large marsupials? Anyway, there's some category of animal in Australia that dies out in the year 1000. And New Zealand is settled for the first time in 1350, so it's on the to-do list.
So I'm told we're going to continue the theme of global interconnectedness at the reception, where we're going to have some food from different parts of the world. So I encourage you to come join us there. And I just want to say thank you, all three of you.